Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us at this Oregon Department of Energy webinar on the Building Performance Standard, or BPS. Today's webinar is going to focus on the roles and responsibilities of energy professionals that are performing compliance-related tasks on behalf of covered building owners under the BPS. My name is Ken Davies. I'm a program analyst with the BPS team, and I'm joined today by the rest of the BPS team, and they'll be introducing themselves as we proceed. Next slide. Before we dive into the main topic, for those of you who may not be familiar with the Oregon Department of Energy, this is our agency's mission. We carry it out by providing a central repository of energy data, information, and analysis, a venue for problem-solving Oregon's energy challenges, energy education and technical assistance, regulation and oversight, and energy programs and activities. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder here on how to work with Microsoft Teams. We'll hold on verbal questions until the end and ask that you please keep your microphones muted for now, but please feel free to add your questions to the chat and we'll start responding to those in order after the presentation is complete. Next slide. Here's what we'll specifically be covering today. The importance of energy professionals, an overview of the BPS, energy professional qualifications, what kinds of experience and certifications are needed, Form Q and how to access that and turn that in, and our energy professional listings, and then the tasks that energy professionals will be performing, including things like benchmarking, certifying, and auditing. Next slide, please. Energy professionals are integral to the success of the BPS, not just for the expertise they provide covered building owners, but also for the quality and integrity of the data they submit on their behalf. Energy professionals are expected to leverage their experience and relationships with others in the building energy sector and provide thoughtful and thorough EMP and O&M plans, sensible audits, and practical and cost-effective energy efficiency measures. Next slide, please. We'll also be providing an overview of the BPS program. And now for the detail on that, I am going to turn it over to Madeline.
Thank you, Ken. I know with all the energy professionals here in attendance, this should be already gospel to you all, but we will spend a couple of minutes just talking about a brief overview about the buildings that are covered, their compliance dates, what compliance means, what type of energy professionals are needed and what they do, as well as looking at some of the different compliance paths. So let's go to the next slide and look at what buildings are covered. This graphic shows the different types of buildings covered by the Oregon BPS. You'll notice that it is broken up into two tiers, Tier 1 and Tier 2, and the tiers are based off of building use type and size. We'll look at Tier 1 first. These are non-residential hotel and motels that start at 35,000 square feet, excluding parking garages. With those smaller buildings of 35,000 square feet to 90,000 square feet having the latest compliance date at June 1st of 2030. The green colors on both the left and the right side of this figure shows the different types of Tier 2. Tier 2 buildings have lower or less stringent requirements than Tier 1, which we'll get into briefly. But to define them, we have non-residential hotel and motels between 20,000 and 35,000 square feet, as well as a special Tier 2 that's broken down by special building use types, as well as square footage. So those special building use types that we're looking at are multifamily residential, hospital, schools, universities, dormitories, barracks, prisons, and residential or senior care facilities. For these specific use types starting at 35,000 square feet, again, excluding any parking garages. They would need to adhere to the Tier 2 rules of the BPS. Next slide. So I tease this a little bit, but there are different types of compliance states across the two different tiers, as well as some different compliance states broken in the first tier. So let's talk about that first. In blue, the first 3 rows on this table is all on tier 1. You'll see that 35,000 and 90,000 square feet of those non-residential hotel and motels have that latest compliance date of June 1st, 2030. And then the next 2 tiers, 90 to 200,000 and 200,000 square feet and greater, each having their own compliance time slot. You'll notice that the 200,000 square feet and greater of non-residential hotel and motels has that earliest compliance of June 1st, 2028. Now in green, we get into the tier 2, and you'll see that regardless of the type of tier 2, regular or special, all tier 2s have the same compliance date of July 1st, 2028. Next slide, please. So I've been throwing around this word compliance a lot. Let's define that. On the screen here are the different tasks that each tier are required to do. For both tier 1 and tier 2 buildings, they need to benchmark. Benchmarking will entail finding the energy use intensity of that building, calculating that building's energy use intensity, and comparing the EUI, the energy use intensity, to the EUIT, energy use intensity target. Those targets are based off of building use type and operating factors, and Lisa will get into it a little bit later about how you find those targets, or you can look at our last month's webinar on how to use the EUIT target finder. Now, if you're a tier 2 building, your responsibilities are complete. Benchmarking is all you need to do. However, if you are a tier 1 building, you have a few more tasks to complete. So even though tier 2 buildings needed to find that energy use intensity target, only tier 1 buildings need to meet those energy targets. Also, tier 1 buildings, besides meeting the energy use intensity targets, they will need to adhere or attest to an operations and maintenance program, as well as an energy management plan. We'll get into this in a couple slides, but as tier 1 buildings are working to meet their energy targets and they find their EUI is greater than EUIT, in order to stay in compliance, action needs to be taken to reduce that energy use, but we'll go into that in more detail shortly. Next slide. So why are you all here today? We need energy professionals in order to make this program work smoothly. It is required that each building has one of these, or if at least one of these types of professionals in order to be in BPS compliance. There are 3 types of energy professionals that make up the ecosystem of this program. There is the qualified energy manager who benchmarks tier 2 buildings, a qualified person who benchmarks tier 1 or tier 2 buildings, as well as reviews O&M and EMPs, and a qualified energy auditor. And this auditor needs to perform the energy audits and life cycle cost assessments. However, they also can do any of the above roles as well. You'll actually notice that this list is kind of a hierarchical or tiered professional list. The professional can do any action of the next one above it. So you'll notice that the qualified energy manager doesn't have a professional above it. They can only benchmark tier 2 buildings. However, a qualified person can do the responsibilities for tier 1 or tier 2, and then the auditors can do any of the above jobs. Next slide, please. This is a table that shows the different tasks that the energy professionals will need to do. You'll notice that what I just said in a very confusing manner about who can do what job is also shown here in this table, with the QEA being able to do any of the jobs, the QP being able to do the tier 1 or tier 2 jobs, and the QEM only being able to do tier 2 benchmarking. Next slide. This table shows the different forms that need to be submitted to be in compliance for the Oregon BPS. In blue, this is all of the forms that can be submitted as the building owner, and the energy professionals come into play in the yellow, green, and orangish red, the bottom parts of this table. Next slide, please. Now we're going to go into compliance. For tier 2 buildings, as we've said, no matter if they are regular, special, or an extended type of tier 2 building, they have a compliance date of July 1st, 2028. And for that compliance date, they need to verify their information, report their EUIT, and report their EUI. This completes all of the responsibilities and needs for the tier 2 buildings. Next slide. Tier 1 buildings are a bit more complicated, or I will say they can be a bit more complicated. This graph is pretty busy, and so we are going to take you kind of step by step, line by line, row by row of what this graph is trying to say. Next slide. The simplest, most straightforward line of compliance for tier 1 buildings is that they meet their target. At least 6 months before the compliance date, they're able to verify their information, identify their EUI target, identify their EUI. Their EUI is less than or equal to that target, and so they need to fill out the listed forms, and they are done with this program for the next 5 years. Next slide. However, if they find that their EUI is greater than their EUI target, compliance is still within reach, just looks a little bit different. At least 6 months before the compliance date, they find that target, their initial EUI, and then they need to choose a compliance path. At the same time, by the compliance date, they need to submit an energy audit, report their energy efficiency measures, still submit an O&M and EMP, and follow and choose one of the following compliance paths. Next slide, please. There are 3 alternative compliance paths for BPS: conditional, investment, and investment through conditional compliance. You'll notice that to get here, all building owners and building owner energy teams will have needed to complete and submit an ASHRAE Level 2 audit, and they're all over their target. In conditional compliance, the energy audit has brought up the energy efficiency measures that will bring the building down or below their energy target. And the building owner has been able to already implement those energy efficiency measures. However, the data just isn't there. Conditional compliance is saying that you have implemented your energy efficiency measures before the compliance date. However, you just need more time for the data to show that these measures are working efficiently. For the investment criteria, the same is true that the energy efficiency measures have been implemented before the compliance date. However, in this case, the building is still not going to meet its target. There are going to be buildings that will not reach their target, or there are buildings that don't have a target. In this case, the investment criteria is the way to go, where you need to get that ASHRAE level 2 audit, identify all the cost-effective energy efficiency measures, and implement those measures before the compliance date. The last option is investment criteria through conditional compliance. In this case, again, the building owner is above its target. It got its ASHRAE level 2 audit. It knows what energy efficiency measures need to be implemented. However, doesn't make sense for that building to implement those measures at that time. Maybe they found that their chiller or their HVAC system needs to be replaced, but there's still life in the one that is currently there. In order to be cost effective, in order for it to make sense for the building and the building owner, in this case, although they've identified the measure before the compliance date, they will implement it after the compliance date. Next slide. Almost on the home stretch. So for those two on the left, the conditional compliance and the investment criteria, they have implemented their EEMs before the compliance date, and now annually or within 15 months of their final EEM implementation, they'll report that progress and also report their annual and final EUI. For the investment criteria, like we said earlier, these EEMs will be implemented after the compliance date. They will need to submit a life cycle cost assessment in order to show us that plan as well of when the EEMs will be implemented. And after the implementation, they will have that annual and within 15 months of final implementation to report that progress and annual and final EUI. If you are confused, that is okay. We have lots of guidance on this. We are there to help walk you or your clients through this process. There are webinars and there are emails. I'm going to pass it now off to Lisa and to talk a little bit more about the energy professionals themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Madeline. I think I'm actually up next. I'm Blake Schlide. I'm with the ODO Codes and Standards section, and I will talk about the energy professional qualifications. So you might so after Madeline kind of gave that overview of all the tasks and kind of exciting elements of the compliance pathways, you might be thinking, oh, I would love to be involved with some of those or help my building or help my building owners that I have relationships with and work with help to comply with the BPS. So I'm going to talk about the descriptions of those different energy professional categories within the Oregon Building Performance Standard and what each one requires to hold and what each one kind of allows a professional to do within the context of the Oregon BPS. This part of the presentation is going to dive into the definitions and the requirements for what makes a qualified professional, those three different levels and roles that are defined within the Oregon BPS. And then later in the presentation, we'll cover more about some of the specific activities and duties of that qualified professional. We'll also cover how to fill out the Form Q, how to fill it out and where someone can locate a publicly available list of the energy professionals. Next slide. So there are certifications that indicate expertise in building-related operations and energy use and different tasks that are associated with work under the BPS, like energy management, analysis, and auditing. Every individual's professional experiences will differ, but requiring these levels of experience and qualifications help ODO and help building owners and those involved with BPS compliance have confidence that the professionals completing these tasks have the experience and background that will support quality work. Within the Oregon BPS, there are really three levels of qualified professional roles, as we've talked about, but we'll just continue to reiterate. There's the qualified energy auditor, qualified person, and qualified energy manager. And then there's a list of specific combination of experience and or certifications that one needs to hold in order to serve in one of these roles. You'll notice as we kind of go through this and have been going through this that there is some nesting and crossover among the different qualified professional roles, and we'll dig into some of the details in the next few slides. But in general, the typical requirements associated with some of the certifications include a combination of experience, education, training, exams, some continuing education classes, in some cases renewals, and fees for applications. And then over the next few slides, we'll go over some of these specific certifications. Next slide, please. This slide gives an outline of the 3 roles and the required professional experience associated with each one. So we'll get into those individual certifications associated with each one on the next slides, but I mentioned that each role has some kind of a combination in most cases between experience and certification. Moving from the lightest lift on the left side, for background requirements on the left is the qualified energy manager, which only requires 2 years of educational and or professional experience with commercial building operations or energy management. So this is the one certification that really just requires, or the one qualified professional that really just requires the experience to be able to hold the QEM without requiring any kind of separate testing or individual certification. Then in the middle, there's the qualified person that requires training and expertise in building energy use analysis as far as the required experience goes. And then lastly, the qualified energy auditor on the right side requires 3 years of professional experience in building energy auditing. And just to note that in many times these roles can be filled by in-house staff. If you're a building owner and you have somebody who meets these education and experience and, if applicable, certification requirements too, those roles could be met by somebody who works for that organization. Particularly for the QEM role, which is mostly applicable for Tier 2 buildings, it doesn't require any special courses or certifications, but only that experience with building operations and management. So that QEM role is primarily applicable to Tier 2 buildings, reporting and benchmarking. So many owners and managers of Tier 2 buildings often have this experience. But just to note that if you do have this experience, please do submit still your qualifications first so that we're aware of your experience and know that. So and you submit that through your Form Q, and we'll talk more about that later. So now, having kind of discussed the required professional experience associated with each one of these energy professional qualifications, the next slide will talk about some of the certifications. This table outlines the specific certifications that are listed within the Oregon BPS standard for each role. So if you open up our standard, the Oregon BPS based on ASHRAE 100, and look to the definitions, each one of these terms, the QEM, QP, and QEA, are defined, and they list the applicable certifications directly under there. So this table is just a summary of what's already in the definition, so you might have already seen it there, but you can see on the left side that there are no specific certifications required for the QEM role. However, both for the QP and the QEA roles, any one of a number of certifications will fulfill the requirement as a way to demonstrate training and educational background and knowledge. Certifications must be active and in good standing to qualify. And it's important to note that ODO does not set the requirements for what it takes to achieve these individual certifications. These are all third-party licensures, certificates, degrees that are well established in industry, and ODO relies upon to set a standard of professional capabilities and competencies. The variety of eligible certification programs offers really flexible pathways to fulfill these roles, and we leverage the requirements of those established programs to help ensure that the professionals that are working under the BPS have the required skill set. And just a note too, that when developing this list, as we were going through our initial program rulemaking, ODO aligned with similar definitions and roles and certifications that had been established in Washington State with Washington's Clean Building Standard. Next slide, please. So this slide gives an overview of the base requirements to be a licensed design professional, an architect or an engineer. And these apply to both the qualified person and the qualified energy auditor roles. These are well-developed licensure criteria that many architects and engineers who work in the consulting and design industries are familiar with and hold in order to be able to stamp drawings and do designs and submit applications for permit when they're designing a building. So they come with a professional competency and commitment to uphold standards of ethics and integrity in their respective fields. So these don't include only testing requirements to obtain these licenses, but also minimum experience working under other licensed professionals, along with continuing education requirements. And again, just to note that these licenses do require an Oregon-specific licensure. And any professionals who are licensed in other states but want to work in Oregon and do work for the Oregon Building Performance Standard need to also have their licenses in Oregon, which can often be done through a reciprocity process and applications and reference check without the need to take another test. But oftentimes these architects and engineers are licensed in multiple states, and we require for the Oregon BPS to be licensed in Oregon. Next slide, please. Two other certifications applicable to both the QP and the QEA are the CEM, the Certified Energy Manager from the Association of Energy Engineers, and the Energy Management Professional from the Energy Management Association. These both require varying amounts of professional experience and education coupled with the test. Typically, having a degree in higher education will reduce the experience requirement for both of these. The CEM requires an application and multi-day training and then passing an exam. The EMP also requires an application and successfully completing an exam, and both also require renewal and continuing education. But these are two additional certifications that if you hold them, you can serve as the role of a qualified person or a qualified energy auditor. Next slide, please. Other certifications specifically applicable to the qualified person include the BOC, the Building Operator Certification Level 2 from Building Potential, and the Building Commissioning Certification from an ANSI accredited organization, such as the Certified Building Commissioning Professional from the Association of Energy Engineers, and the Certified Commissioning Professional from the Building Commissioning Certification Board. Next slide, please. Locally, the Lane Community College in Oregon has historically offered a robust energy management with building controls degree program. Over the years, this program has produced many active, well-trained leaders in energy efficiency in Oregon, and it was included to recognize these contributions and the value of this particular degree. Just to note that that program is undergoing some change. It's not currently active over the past couple years, but it might become active again in the future. Maybe there's an opportunity to provide additional workforce to support the building performance standard and building owners with meeting the standard. But any former graduates with these degrees are still applicable for qualified person status within the BPS program. And also wanted to note that while ODO recognizes there are many other excellent energy engineering, sustainability, and similar programs at universities across the country and the world, we are not at this time vetting those other programs in any sort of capacity, and we wouldn't be able to do that in any sort of complete or equitable way given the variety and plethora of programs that are out there. So we're not adding any or evaluating any additional degrees to add to this list. Working professionals with other degrees would need to obtain one of the other certifications that are already listed on the within the standard. But occasionally we do get questions about, hey, I have this degree, can I serve as a qualified professional? Is it an equivalent degree? Right now we're not vetting those other degrees to add to the list. Next slide, please. This slide shows a couple other certifications that allow someone to serve as a qualified energy auditor, and those include the Certified Energy Auditor from the Association of Energy Engineers and the Building Energy Auditing Professional from ASHRAE. ASHRAE is the American Society of Heating, Air Conditioning, and Refrigerating Engineers. Each one of these requires a varying amount of educational experience, professional experience, and in some cases, documentation of experience completing an energy audit and then passing an exam with maybe a required training course. And then there's continuing education to maintain that each one of the certifications. And again, both of these certifications would allow somebody to serve as a qualified energy auditor. And if you remember back from before, being a qualified energy auditor also allows you to serve as a qualified person or as a qualified energy manager. Next slide, please. So you might be wondering now, hey, I meet one of those criteria. I have one of those certifications that were listed on the previous slides. I would love to help perform work under the BPS program as one or all of a QEM, QP, QEA, either to report my buildings, be involved with the buildings that my organization owns and manages, or to help other building owners meet the requirements for theirs. And if you're thinking that, great. So in order for us to be aware of the universe of qualified professionals in Oregon and vet those requirements, we ask that you fill out a Form Q so that we can check it out and verify that you meet those eligibility requirements. What this will do is allow us to track, especially as we start getting compliance submittals as those compliance dates approach, and directly connect those applications for compliance with the BPS with the known qualified professionals that are on the list, to give us more confidence that the applications are high quality and submitted by someone whose qualifications have been vetted and checked out. And just to reinforce that, if you meet one of those listed criteria, education, experience, you can do the work, but you need to let us know so that we're confident and have the background and universe of professional experiences that are out there doing BPS work. And again, just a reminder that building owners, building managers, facility managers, or employees of the building owner can act as energy professionals if they have the qualifications, or they can also be consultants and third parties that help building owners meet those requirements. Qualified professionals are individuals that are certified, not firms. So occasionally we get the question of, can I certify my firm to provide as like a firm-wide QEA? They are individual professional specific qualifications that are associated with individual people, not companies and not firms. So we do need a separate Form Q when you submit for each individual. We have a link to Form Q on this slide. The slide deck is available on our website, but there's also just a direct link to the Form Q on the website. And it's an electronically fillable PDF form and can be submitted to our program email address, oregonbps@energy.oregon.gov. Next slide, please. So now I'll go into just a little bit of an overview of what that Form Q looks like. There's 4 main sections. Be sure to fill out each one completely and accurately. Include the experience and certifications with your licensure and certification numbers for all the roles that you wish to fulfill. Please let us know if you have any questions as you're filling it out. We're happy to help you fill it out to make sure that it's complete and that everything's on there too. But just make sure that you check all the boxes and fill out all the sections for each position that you would like to be listed as. So remember that a qualified person can do qualified energy manager tasks, a qualified energy auditor can do qualified person and qualified energy manager tasks. And then make sure that you're checking the box whether or not you would like to be publicly listed for each position if you want to be listed on the spreadsheet that we post on our website. Next slide, please. So when we receive the forms, we review the certifications that are listed and make sure that the person holds that claim certification. So we might go to the Oregon database of professional engineers if somebody's listed an engineering license number and check to make sure that they're still active and actually hold that engineering license, and similar for all the other certifications and databases. We do our best to review those on a timely basis, but we kind of take them in batches. And sometimes reviewing the Form Qs may take a couple to a few weeks before we're able to review that batch and upload a new version of the qualified professional list to our website. So, what do we look for? We look for, are the licenses ones that we accept, and certifications ones that are on the list, those defined certifications? Are they in good standing, and are they active? And then is the reported experience commensurate with the position? And just to continue to remind folks that we list the qualified professionals that are on our website that have submitted information to us, but we are not endorsing anyone who's on the website and who's listed and who's submitted to us. This is just a resource that we provide to the covered building owners, to industry, to make available folks that are able to do the work under the BPS program. But we are not endorsing any one individual or organization that's on the list. And we do reserve the right to rescind status if there's poor performance. Next slide, please. So I mentioned we do publish a list of qualified professionals on our website for public availability. While all individuals who wish to do work and meet the qualifications need to submit a Form Q, we know that not everyone may want to be listed publicly. Some are consultants who want their name on a public list to be available for marketing purposes, but some may not. For example, if they're just internal to a covered building organization and just want to be able to submit for their own buildings. You can note that on the form. So we maintain our own internal list of all the Form Q submittals that we've received, but then we also maintain a public list that's posted up on the website and updated every few weeks for all those professionals that have noted that they would like to be publicly listed and publicly available. Next slide, please. So now is when I will turn it over to Lisa to dive into detail about the energy professional responsibilities.
Great. Hi, I'm Lisa Gartland. I'm a facility engineer here at Odo, working on the BPS program, and I'm going to take you through some of the details about benchmarking, reviewing O&M and EMP programs, and looking at energy audits and decarbonization plans that energy professionals need to be aware of. So first of all, benchmarking. There's two parts to benchmarking. The one part is finding your energy use intensity, but the other is finding the number to compare it to, which is called the energy use intensity target. That can be found by a QEM, QP, or QEA for Tier 2 buildings, or a QP or QEA for Tier 1 buildings. It gets reported on a Form B, which is your building activity and energy use intensity target form. So you should be aware forms are not yet available. We're not yet taking reports of this bits of information. We have an online portal that we're currently developing, hoping to have ready in the next month or so. And as soon as it's ready, you will be notified. The way to figure out your EUI target is to use the ORBPS EUI target tool. It's a downloadable Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't have any macros or anything. You can find it right on the ORBPS website in the right-hand column, or you can click on a link from this presentation if you end up downloading this presentation. This will find your EUI target in units of kBTU per square foot. It will also give you a definitive listing of what your building tier is and when your compliance state is. In some buildings, it's very straightforward. Others, it's a little sketchy. So you need to actually fill out the tool to figure out to confirm exactly when you're going to be able to, or going to need to submit information. So I am not going to go into any more detail about EUI target or the target tool today, because we last month just had almost an hour and a half long seminar covering that tool. So there's two things I can refer you to. One is the guidance document BPS 004. Sorry, that should be the 005 or 003, calculating the energy use intensity target. And then our BPS webinar from last month in March. Very good resources. So benchmarking, the other half of benchmarking is to figure out your energy use intensity. So just some logistics about what we do with that. First of all, who can calculate it? Once again, for Tier 2 buildings, either a QEM, a QP, or a QEA can figure out the energy use intensity. For Tier 1 buildings, we confine that to just QP, qualified person, or a qualified energy auditor. EUI target is reported on Form C, which is the calculation of energy use intensity form. Once again, forms are not yet available, and they are under development and should be ready in a month or so. However, the bulk of the EUI calculation is done in Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which we refer to as ESPM. And so you will be inputting a lot of information into Energy Star Portfolio Manager. We do have a guidance document. It is that BPS 004 that was on the last slide, but should have been here and is here. And I have some information also on the next few slides with a few more details about calculating EUI. So first of all, what is energy use intensity? It's building energy use divided by the gross floor area, not including the parking area. When we say building energy use, we sort of use that as a shorthand, but under Oregon BPS, the energy use intensity should be based on the net energy use of the building. Net energy use is the energy that enters the building minus any energy that leaves the building. When would you have energy leaving the building? Well, if you have some kind of energy generation like a solar PV or a wind system, you might produce more energy than you need to use at any one time, and it might get sent to the grid. So that would be your excess energy generation. So what we want to know is how much energy you pulled from the grid or from natural gas pipes or from propane tanks or whatever, minus any energy that got sent away from the building. And that would be your net energy use. Each building has different metering, different billing. Sometimes you'll have very comprehensive solar energy metering, and sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll just get a net energy bill. So we are working to come up with some more concrete guidelines for buildings that have generation facilities. So that we'll be a little more clear on exactly how that, what are the easiest ways to report that in ESPM. As you should also know, energy use intensity needs to be calculated from 12 consecutive months of utility or energy data. And it should be over the last 24 months before whatever date it is that you're reporting. So if you were reporting today, it would be over the last 2 years worth of data. If you're reporting 2 years from now, this month's going to be important to you. So that gives you a little bit of flexibility. Sometimes 1 month doesn't quite hit your target and the next month might, or the next set of 12 months might. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility in finding, the best EUI value to maybe keep your building below its target. So Energy Star Portfolio Manager, it requires, when you're doing this, you're going to need to put some input into Energy Star Portfolio Manager and get some output from Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So the input is going to be a description of your building or maybe a group of buildings and any meters that you have. It might also include a fuel deliveries as well as meters for at least 24 months. You want to have you want to try to put in at least 24 months of energy use data everywhere you can get it for energy use, energy generation, or fuel deliveries. And the reason for that is because of the output from ESPM is what we call a weather normalized energy use intensity. Weather normalization takes the energy use intensity, so it takes the actual energy use, divides it by square footage, and then says, well, wait a second, what was the weather like this year? Was it unusually hot or cold, or was it just typical? And it will adjust that EUI so that we're not taking some, we didn't take information from some really cold year where you used a lot more energy than you would be expected to normally. So the output from Energy Star Portfolio Manager that we use is the site weather normalized energy use intensity. So that's the site value, the value used by the building, has nothing to do with what came out of the power plant, went through transmission, or what came out of a natural gas plant through pipes and maybe got lost. It's actually just what you use at the site. So often people also refer to source energy use, but we're not using source energy use. So that is the important value, the site weather normalized EUI. That is the value that we're going to be comparing to EUI target. We do use a lot of shorthand and just call it EUI compared to EUI target. But what we're really referring to always is the site WNEUI. When they do the weather normalization, maybe I haven't been looking at very unusual weather, but I haven't seen differences between EUI and weather normalized EUI of more than a couple points. So it's usually not a very big adjustment. So another output that you need is not only this key value, but we also ask for monthly energy use and or generation for each fuel. And we want you to link your Energy Star portfolio manager to the Oregon BPS ESPM account as well, so that we can verify or just check things out, because what else do we have to do, right? So benchmarking. There's a few little tricks and little foibles in ESPM regarding delivered fuels. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about delivered fuels? Delivered fuels are any fuels that don't have a continuous meter that measures them. They will just be like maybe a propane delivery or fuel oil or diesel that gets usually brought to your facility in a truck or something and just dropped off in for use for whenever you need it. Usually it's a sporadically used fuel. Sometimes it's used more commonly. But ESPM does have the capability to log these delivered fuels. If you've been playing with ESPM, you just set it up as a delivered fuel, so not a continuously metered fuel. So the trick here, the problem with delivered fuels is that they're not always delivered every month. They might only be delivered a couple times a year. And under ESPM, when you try to do the weather normalization, if you're including the delivered fuels in that total for your EUI, it needs at least 5 entries over 2 years. And the reason it needs that is it does, in the weather normalization, it tries to create a correlation between various weather characteristics and the use. And with less than 5 entries, it just can't get a good correlation. So the trick for that is, if you only have a few entries, is to distribute those fuels over more months kind of artificially, either based on the number of days or based on heating degree days or outdoor temperature, depending on what the use is for that fuel. If you have any particular questions, let us know for particular fuels that you need to adjust or spread out over more months. Generators, people often ask what to do with their generator energy use. A lot of times generators will run on diesel or some other fuel that's delivered. Often the generators only run once a month just as a check to make sure it's still working, and that in an emergency you know how to start it up and it will start. If that is the case, we don't need you to include that in the EUI for your building. However, it's good practice to log those things into Energy Star Portfolio Manager, log that fuel delivery in there just in case, because if you do have a power outage or emergency at the building and you have to use your generator, we will want to know what energy was used by that thing. So if you keep those things logged in Energy Star Portfolio Manager and you have an incident, an emergency, you can just check a box and that generator energy use will be included, or that fuel will be included in your EUI calculation. Some energy end uses are not included in EUI calculations, and they need to be adjusted for. So there are things that you can subtract out of your EUI or out of your total energy use for your building. We do not include parking lots, parking lot energy use, EV chargers, or if you have some other kind of transportation equipment that's used outside of the building. Those things, if you know what the energy use is up for them, if they have a meter that's a continuous meter and you can point to that, we can subtract that meter from the rest of your energy use. Another thing that if you is continuously submetered, you can also subtract the energy uses communications equipment. Some buildings have cell towers on top of them, and they can use a lot of energy. If they're submetered continuously, you can subtract that meter from the building. Now, that's only if that communications equipment is not serving the primary purpose of the building. I mean, if you are a cell phone service provider and that you cell towers are your business, then we don't subtract that. But a lot of times you can. So you can subtract submetered energy use within ESPM. If you have these metered values, you can just put them down as a separate meter. You can enter them as negative numbers. And I looked it up, you really can do this. And you can include that submeter in the total used to calculate EUI. So when it adds everything up, it'll subtract that value. But I do want to caution everybody, make sure you understand your building's energy metering. It's really always kind of a puzzle what building meters are measuring. So you want to be able to trace your meter through, your electrical panels, et cetera, and make sure if this meter is just supposed to be communications equipment, is that really all it's measuring, or is it picking up something else or whatever? So it can be very complicated. But please understand your metering before you start subtracting stuff. What if you don't have a sub-metered parking lot or EV charger? If you don't have a parking lot or EV charger that's separately metered, sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. We do have an allowance that you can take. So it's basically an adjustment that you can take off of your site EUI. And when we have the forms all together, the Form C is where you'll be reporting EUI. This might not look exactly like this. This was just done in a spreadsheet as a mock-up. But what we're proposing is that for 3 different types of parking areas and 3 different types of EV chargers, we have these allowances. So for the parking areas, it's a kBTU per square foot. For EV chargers, it's just a kBTU per charger. It would just subtract that value off of your site EUI or your energy use. It does a little correction for your square footage. One thing to note that sometimes in Energy Star Portfolio Manager, you might have included your parking area in the square footage for that building. And this is also a place where you could subtract that square footage. In this spreadsheet, I have a little example where started out with a site EUI of 100 and with a 10,000 square foot, 3 different types of parking garages and 30 total chargers. 100 EUI went down to 94.6. That wasn't a whole lot of change, but it could be the difference between meeting target and not meeting target. One thing to watch out for is if I had kept the parking area within my 100,000, this is a 100,000 square foot building, that would have changed if if that was included in my ESPM gross floor area. My ESPM gross floor area and my real gross floor area would be different. That GFA without parking would have changed to 90,000 square feet. And that becomes the new denominator in the EUI calculation. That could actually swing so that your corrected weather normalized value could increase. I didn't put that example here, but I think I with just a 10,000 square foot completely enclosed parking garage included in ESPM, my corrected EUI went up to about 105. So for EUI reporting, so for tier 1 buildings and tier 2 buildings, you only report once on EUI, and it's before the compliance date, and we call that quote unquote the official EUI. You don't really need to know what we call it. You just need to report it. And we kind of have this, we're going to be using these internal names for what's going on when things were reported. If tier 2 or tier 1 buildings that already meet target, once again, they only need to report EUI once before their compliance date, and then they're done. But if you don't meet your target, then EUI reporting is going to have to happen quite a few times. So there's always this initial EUI reporting that will happen 180 days before your compliance date. It tells us, hey, I've got a tier 1 building. I don't think I'm meeting target. This is when you have to choose your compliance path, et cetera. And you're just going to give us a shout out and say, I think this is my initial EUI, and I think, this is my target, and I don't think I'm meeting it, and go on your merry way. If you want to update us with an official EUI before the compliance date, but after 180 days before the compliance date in that little window, then that becomes your new EUI. We call it the official EUI. Once you have, once you've chosen one of these compliance paths for not meeting target, then you're going to have to either report to us every 12 months or after you've implemented all of your energy efficiency measures. So usually you want to wait about 12 months after you've implemented your final energy efficiency measure, because that'll give it a whole year's worth of data over which to calculate a new EUI. Hopefully that shows that the energy efficiency measures are working, they were fully implemented, they're doing what they're supposed to do, so you get a new true EUI. So you need to wait at least 12 months after that final implementation, but not more than 15, so that we don't stretch on forever. We want to wrap this thing up. If you're using that compliance path where you haven't installed all your energy efficiency measures before your compliance date, that is the investment criteria through conditional compliance path. If you're following that path, you may need to do some annual EUI reporting, every year, depending on how long it takes for you to implement all of your measures. You might just have to do that every year and you never get to a final because your measures are just going to be so spaced out. But we know that you're implementing measures, and that's what we want to know. So all of these updated EUI values will be reported on Form C. Along with that Form C, if you're doing these updated EUI values sometime after your compliance date, we're going to want to know something about, all the energy efficiency measures. Did they get implemented? When did they get implemented? So we'll also ask you for either the Form E or the Form L, depending on which path you're following. That just gives us a little status update of the measures and what was implemented, just to confirm. So another responsibility for energy professionals is to review and or certify your O&M and EMP. So what are these things? O&M always refers to the operations and maintenance program of the building. So these are just routine checks to make sure equipment is operating as it's supposed to, and scheduled equipment maintenance to ensure equipment function is functioning right and to keep it functioning for as long as it's supposed to. Something like changing an air filter is regular routine operations and maintenance. Something like walking through the building to make sure all the lighting is working and checking switches are working. That is routine operations and maintenance. There's a whole lot of routine maintenance that goes into maintaining, especially some of these very large buildings. It's a huge task. So we want the energy professionals to find out what operations and maintenance things are happening in buildings. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But the other thing we want you to check on is the energy management plan. So an energy management plan should be filed in a notebook somewhere at the very least. It should be a record of the energy use of the building, should be a record of all the energy using equipment of the building, a list of who to call if equipment fails or needs parts or needs service. It's thinking ahead about that equipment. How old is it? When do we expect it to need to be replaced? What do we think is going to replace it? Where are we going to get that? What's it going to cost? How are we planning ahead to budget for that? Because, equipment does fail. We need to plan ahead. The reason these two things are important for the building performance standard is we are asking you to report your energy use. And we're asking, in some cases, for people to make some significant improvements in their energy use. But we want to also make sure that buildings are operating as well as they can and are operating for the long term and are operating in a way that the equipment isn't going to fail early and cost you more money. So we just want to make sure that you are operating as intended at the energy level that you say you're going to be operating at, and that you don't start doing something that suddenly makes you use a whole lot more energy as well. So this kind of work, it's not as flashy. It doesn't get we haven't really given it as much attention as we've given that benchmarking portion of this program, the EUI and EUI target. But it is a required part of the program for every tier 1 building is to have the QP or the QEA for tier 1 buildings need to check out the O&M programs and the energy management plan and verify, certify, review, tell us, what we have you do as a checklist and tell us that these things exist and that they're as good as can be intended. So what do we have? What is the actual reporting requirement for this review work? We ask for a checklist. We're not asking for the actual O&M logs or programs or the actual EMP. We're asking for the QP or QEA to review these programs and go through this checklist and make sure that various elements are included within these programs. So once again, the checklists aren't available yet. They will be on the online portal. But they are already included in these 2 guidance documents that we have up on our website, the BPS 007 and the BPS 008. The last, I don't know, they're 3 to 5 pages long. They're pretty long checklists. They're on the end of these guidance documents. So if you haven't checked those out and you're planning on being a QP who is going to be doing some of this work, please do look at these guidance documents. We also ask, so the QP will be submitting these checklists, but we also ask that the tier 1 building staff, either the building owner or the facility manager or whoever, keep the O&M records and their EMP reports available, because we here at ORBPS may ask to see them. We realize that O&M records are not always, in a report form. They might be in a notebook or something. We might ask you to take some photos and keep us up to date on, how are you tracking what's going on? EMP reports can generally be a little more, electronic versions of a report, typical, but at this point, we're not asking for the actual records or reports. We're just asking for the QP or QEA to fill out a checklist certifying that these programs exist and have all the elements included. So when we ask you to review these things, I had one person ask a very, insightful question, like how are we supposed to check this? Do we just take people's word for it? I mean, you're going to ask the building owner or the facility manager, hey, are you doing this? And probably they're going to say, yeah, sure, we do that. But do they actually do that? I want you to trust but verify, let's put it that way. So this is an opportunity. Yeah, I used to do building auditing and building retro commissioning, and really we never looked at their O&M work or their energy management plans. It just wasn't really part of the job. So I realized that for a lot of energy auditors or energy professionals, maybe this isn't something that they're used to doing, but it's a huge opportunity. And I really hope that everybody can take this to heart and not just go through the motions and fill out the checklist and check it all out just because they said so. I want you to actually look at their records if you can get a hold of them, or speak to the person who does the actual checking and the actual operations and maintenance, and whatever they do with their monthly walkarounds or whenever they do it. Also, don't just fill out the checklist and say, oh, they have this, they don't have that. I don't think we're going to reject it if you say they don't have this portion of it. What I would like to have is for you to be giving feedback and requesting improvements. Now, obviously, you can't, make people do this stuff, but with the experience that we all have, we're going to be able to point out the deficiencies and put it into some kind of context as to how important these things are. So, if you're finding a whole lot of deficiencies, try to at least get them to do the more important things that will affect their energy use or their building comfort or their, their operations, their things that they have to keep repairing over and over again. Try to be insightful. And as I said, it's an opportunity here to try to really give people some good advice about building operations. We do want you to try to verify the O&M procedures that they follow. And by doing that, you would look at their task lists, any reports, any logs, maybe some building management system settings, equipment lists. We want you to look at their EMP records. So EMP records should include a whole lot of equipment lists, etc. And then you can also, I have put together this thing, it's called a O&M and EMP tool/template. And it is there to help you either fill out the checklist or maybe to help a building set up a program if they don't really have a very comprehensive one. So this is where we get to pause. And I am going to open that thing up. So I put this together. It's a template. It was based on the Washington State put together a spreadsheet with a whole lot of measures for different types of equipment, and I expanded upon it and I made it a little more interactive. But it's also based on, I think it's standard, I want to say 218, ASHRAE standard 218, which is an operations and maintenance task list. So anyway, this is the inside of that template. So here's the instructions page, and it just says, hey, fill out all of these sheets, basically. The blue sheets are for O&M basic info about the building. The orange sheets are the O&M portion, and the green sheets are the EMP portion. And I know some people might be colorblind and can't tell, but they're also pretty well labeled. So there's the instruction sheet. Here's the building info. You would just put all your basics, name, address, UBID, construction year, operating hours. This here is a link to some information we pulled in from the forms, form reporting, the EUI target and EUI reporting things. You can put this information here. The next thing is to put in your building contacts. Your building contacts could be important if you are going to use this tool as a log. Then you can just pull in one of these people to do some tasks, which I'll show you in a minute. This is an important sheet where you log all your building equipment. Everything always gets logged or written in on the yellow portions, and other portions are just either informational or questions or automatically generated. Like here, a unique ID is automatically generated for this piece of equipment. So I put some artificial building equipment in here. I have an air handler unit. It's a supply air handler unit. It was installed in 2002. So the interesting thing about this sheet is it's it's not just an air handler and, oh, I've logged it. There's a whole lot of questions. Well, air handlers in particular have a whole lot of questions to answer. Does it use a UV lamp? Does it have energy recovery? What kind of heating coil? So there's all of these questions that will help this tool pull out a lot of tasks that need to be done in an operations and maintenance scenario. Another important question on most of these is, are you going to include O&M tasks for air distribution systems? And that you'll see that can reduce the number of tasks that will pop up for someone to do all the time. So there's a whole lot of questions. There could be as many as 10 questions for different types of equipment. Other types of equipment have many fewer questions, like there's a roof that has, or a vending machines that just have one question. And that question is, do you want to include inspections of this roof in your task list? So all of these questions need to be filled out. I think they're kind of helpful questions, not just for figuring out what tasks to use, but just sort of figuring out, what do I have in this building? What is this equipment? It just helps you sort of narrow in, zoom in on what it is you have. So what happens when you've filled out this building equipment? Well, you automatically get this set of O&M tasks. You get a task screen, and you get the overall task list. So this task list is everything that came out of that system. And you might, if you made any changes, it's a pivot table, so don't hate me. You might have to go in and refresh it. Same thing. I don't think the task screen needs to be refreshed. What I can do is, if I want to manually, if I don't want to look for dirt accumulation semi-annually, I can just say, no, I'm not going to do that. And it will take that off this task list for me, and it won't be something I have to do for this air handler. So you have the ability to cut down the number of tasks here in any way you want. Now you'll see, I guess, ASHRAE standard, the standard that comes up with these tasks, I don't know if they're overzealous, but they have a lot of tasks that show up in a lot of places, and they will be quarterly or semi-annually or annually, and you need just to figure out, sometimes you'll need to just sort through these and get rid of a bunch of tasks that are coming up quarterly and semi-annually, which is redundant. So so I apologize for that, but it comes out of ASHRAE, not me. So that's the task screen and the task list. And it also, as I said, works with this building equipment. There's always that question, do you want the O&M tasks for this thing? And it will cut out a bunch of tasks, maybe not all of them, but some. So those three things can work together. And eventually what you come up with is this overall list here, O&M task logging, that should be the lists that your facilities people follow and try to do on this basis. This also has the ability to enter something that you've done. Like, let's say today for 17-2026, I entered some technicians. Pete technician, let's see, what did he do? What equipment? Maybe there's an RTU. He was RTU1. He has some tasks that need to be done quarterly, and today was his big day for doing it. And so various tasks that he needed, there's a lot of them here. He checked the RTU's fan belt wear and alignment, and he said, tightened, if I could type, tightened fan belt. He can log that task, and there we go. It gets logged in here in this task list. If we go back to this task list here, we will hopefully, we need to do needs to refresh. I don't have an automatic refresh. Somewhere in here, it should log that. This might be a little buggy. So if you find that it's not quite working right, just let me know and I will fix it, because I haven't completely vetted this, but it's still pretty useful. So anyway, those are the O&M work records and the task logging. It could be used for this. You might find it overkill, but it's there. So that's the O&M portion of this tool template. There's also an EMP portion. So once again, your equipment gets loaded in here. You can just pull up the list and it will pull up different equipment. You just do some drop downs to put each piece of equipment in here that you have. You can, if you get the year installed and you know what effective useful life is, it will tell you whether or not that equipment is past its useful life and maybe is going to be needed to be replaced. You can put some condition information in here. And then this is really just the records that you need about that. There's just a whole lot of different types of information. You might not need them for every single piece of equipment, but basically there's some kind of model number, capacity, size, input capacity or efficiency, ratings. You just pick whatever your units are or what type of efficiency. Any operational settings, any notes you want to put down. You can obviously adjust these columns to be whatever you think should be in there for most equipment. It's very, very general at this point. An important thing here is the expected replacement date, projected replacement cost, and what is your energy efficient replacement option. That is a really important thing to be looking ahead at. So this is just a place to log all your equipment, keep track of everything that you need to know about it. So,
hey, Lisa, I just wanted to jump in with a quick time check. We got about 15 minutes left as we go through. I think we still have a few slides on incentives and auditing too.
Yep, I'll get to it.
Great.
All right, so there's just a couple other slides in here where you can drop in your target value, your EUI value, your energy efficiency measures values, any events logs that you have for changes to your building that would affect its energy use, any other training. You'll see in the EMP checklist, there are some requirements for you to be notifying your building and your facility staff and owners, tenants, et cetera, about your energy use and operations. You can log that here as well. So that's this. So back to the presentation. So that is that tool. Use it if you like it, if it's useful. So there are a few other things I want to talk about with energy auditing. There are logistics for that. We should all know by now that only a QEA can perform energy audits, and audits are only required for Tier 1 buildings that aren't meeting their energy use intensity targets. Audits have to be ASHRAE level 2. Results have to be submitted by the compliance date. So you do the energy audit before the compliance date and you submit it by the compliance date. What needs to be submitted is we have a Form E. We will have a Form E, which is the energy audit that lists all the EEMs with simple payback. You'll need to submit an energy audit report that talks about the measures in the building. It's a level 2 audit report. Some buildings may be required to submit a life cycle cost assessment as well, which we will have a Form L for. That is only required if following the investment criteria with conditional compliance path. But it can be done if you're following any path at all. Once again, it's got to be an ASHRAE level 2 audit, and you will need to turn in that audit report. This is a list of all the things the report should include. It's standard level 2 audit report info, which is description of the building and its equipment, graphs and tables of monthly energy use, estimated energy end uses. And then we get into the heart of it, which is the potential energy efficiency measures. We really do want to see enough information in there so that we very much understand what the measure is, what assumptions were made, how calculations were made, where you got these assumptions, where the costs came from, et cetera. One thing to note is that we do not require equipment to be replaced before the end of its useful life. So, if you come up with an energy efficiency measure, it might not be that you might have just replaced the HVAC system and maybe you didn't make the best choice for replacing it. It's not the most efficient, but we don't expect you to rip it out and start all over again. And a very important thing is the summary of what EEMs were recommended. You should be evaluating more EEMs than you choose or recommend, and we want to know why, which ones didn't make the cut and why didn't they make the cut. So we will be developing an energy audit report template. That energy audit report will have pretty typical information, the description, effective useful life, energy savings by fuel, etc. Simple pay, all the way down to the simple payback with or without incentives. And really important for us is when do you expect to implement these measures, or maybe you already have and we'll want to know. That Form E might need to be resubmitted. It might also be a Form L that might have your implementation dates because you did a life cycle cost assessment. It will need to be resubmitted whenever you resubmit the Form C with your EUI update. We are still working out exactly what we're going to accept for Form E information in terms of reports or the form itself. So wait and see. So the life cycle cost assessment has to be done if you're following the IC with CC path, right? But it may be done for any compliance path. And it should have a more in-depth analysis of the costs. So, it might be spreading out the costs over time. It might include financing costs, tax credits and write-offs, rebates, etc. So it's just a more sophisticated analysis. It might help you to refine the list of EEMs that just come up with a simple payback. That might really not be the entire picture of what's going on at a facility or how implementation could happen. Once again, we're working on that form for reporting this. There's always questions about previous audits. If you have previous audits, can they be used? And yes, but. So yes, if they're completed less than 5 years before being submitted, it has to have been an ASHRAE level 2 audit, or maybe you can fill in the gaps of what that audit was missing. It needs to be submitted by a newly minted QEA. You either did the audit or you vouched for that audit if it was done by someone else. There does need to be some supplemental information with that audit, because there's what was this audit for? Did you implement measures from it, or why? If you did, why? If you didn't, why not? What else might have changed in the building since this audit was done? How significant are those changes, and how do they affect the measure energy savings estimates? And if changes were made, what are the interactive effects? Or if measures were installed, what are the interactive effects on the remaining measures? So we need to make sure that anything like that has been accounted for. So sometimes you'll have an audit and you'll have done a whole lot of different stuff, or something very different is happening in the building now. We may not accept that audit. We do reserve the right to reject it. And then one thing is decarbonization plans. This is not going to apply to too many sets of buildings. It's usually for campuses that have a district plant that either delivers hot water, steam, or chilled water. It's supposed to deliver it to at least 3 buildings with at least 100,000 square foot of gross floor area. In some cases, we're really only going to see this if you have already done a decarbonization plan. The whole point of this is you've done some kind of plan trying to make your central plant more efficient, or you want to get rid of the fossil fuel or just reduce fossil fuel use. So if you've already done this plan, you may be able to submit that in place of an energy audit. It can also include retrofit work in the buildings, not just in the central plant. But we don't expect to see too many of these, because I don't know how many have been done, but we are willing to accept those in lieu of a regular energy audit. So, and I am bringing this over to Andrew and Josh for the last 5 minutes. Sorry to take so long.
Thanks, Lisa. I'll be very quick here. So quick review of our BPS incentive programs. We have 2 programs, the Early Compliance Action and Planning Program and the Building Energy Reduction Incentive Program. The ECAP program offers incentive funding for planning activities such as benchmarking or conducting an energy audit. And the max incentives for Tier 1 buildings are $35,000 to $50,000 depending on building size. Max incentive for all Tier 2 buildings is $10,000. And we closed the first round of ECAP back in December. We plan to open round 2 in May with about $1.2 million in funding available. And the Berry program offers incentive funding for the installation of energy efficiency measures such as HVAC and lighting upgrades with a max of $100,000 for Tier 1 buildings and $50,000 for Tier 2 buildings. And we have a Berry funding update coming soon. Next slide, please. Just a few quick requirements for ECAP as it relates to energy professionals. Items to work on now. This is for Tier 1 buildings only. Hire a qualified person to help you complete your ECAP application. That involves energy benchmarking and reporting primarily. And by the way, Tier 2 buildings do not need an energy pro to apply for ECAP. The ECAP application process is very quick and easy for Tier 2 buildings. So for Tier 1 buildings, you're going to want to gather your energy data, input your energy data into your Energy Star Portfolio Manager, fill out your ODO target tool, and then determine if your weather normalized EUI is 15 units above your target. This was in statute. For Tier 1 buildings, your EUI needs to be 15 units above your EUIT to be eligible. And now I'll hand it over to Josh to talk about Berry.
Next slide, Lisa.
Here it is.
Here it is. Wonderful. I'm Josh Price. I'm the incentives analyst for the Berry program. We just closed round 1 just about a week ago, and we want to keep everybody thinking about the Berry program because we'll have some updates coming about the program shortly. So right now is the time to start a lot of the work on the items for the Berry program if you want to apply for the incentives for energy efficiency measures upgrades to your buildings. So right now, definitely get a QP if you're a Tier 1 or a QEM for Tier 2. Gather that energy data, get that information into the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, fill out the target tools, and determine if your WN EUI is above your EUIT. If it is, then you can continue the application for Berry. Go to the next slide, Lisa. And also right now, hire a qualified energy auditor to get that energy audit completed, to fill out Form E and develop those project plans so you're ready for round 2 of Berry. I hope you take time to look over. A lot of the information still on our website, so make sure to look over our opportunity announcement, and it will provide a lot of more detail about the Berry program.
So I'll just step in, or is it Ken who's stepping back in? We have a bunch of resources on our website. We have all the guidance documents, lots and lots of links on our website to tools and resources. You can also email us or give us a phone call for any questions you have. I think we have like 2 minutes to address any questions that came up. So
yeah,
we
so
also
thanks. Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Thanks,
Yep.
Ken, Josh, Andrew, Madeline, everyone who helped present today. We did get a number of questions in the chat that I think we are able to we'll go through and we'll hang on until we kind of get through all the questions. We understand if you have to log off now. I know this is everyone's lunch hour, so thanks for spending part of your lunch hour here with us. If you can stick around, feel free to do so. We'll respond to the questions, but if you have to log off and don't get a response to a question that you asked or didn't get an opportunity to ask the question, please feel free to reach out to us directly, and we're happy to work with you. Because I know some of the questions that we got were pretty specific, so there might be some follow-ups needed in there too. So, okay, so the first question was, will a copy of the slides be made available? Yes, they are up on our stakeholder engagement site now, and I put a link in the chat there earlier. Second question was, the EUI is a dynamic metric. After implementing energy efficiency measures to achieve the target EUI, should the EUI target be recalculated based on current conditions of occupancy? And I think that one's probably for you, Lisa.
Generally, no. I mean, it really depends. I mean, if something drastic happens in your building, I don't expect it will change very much. There are things like the operating factor that's based on how many hours hours a week your building operates. If that has changed so that it's in a different category, they're like from 0 to 50 and 51 to 167 and 168 hours a week. If it changes to a different category, that might have an effect. Maybe your building use activity type will change significantly. So, you know, I won't say no, but in general, we don't expect to see huge changes. We more expect to see the EUI change and not the EUI target change. So, but
Thanks.
Never say never.
Thank you. So the next question is, would the SBST, which I think is the Sustainable Building Science Technology degree at South Seattle College's degree, be used in Oregon as in Washington? Is the question. I can take that one. That is not one of the degrees that's listed on our certification list. We included a local Oregon Lane Community College degree, which is like the analog for the one that was included in Washington. Next question is, Odo open to accept other qualifications to be a QP, such as a certified facility manager or certified healthcare facility manager? These are both higher industry certs than the BOC level 2 and require experience overall. I think I can just take that one. Right now, the only certifications that we're allowing are the ones that are listed in the standard, and we don't have any intentions to update those. Next question, are the targets and building EUIs weather adjusted?
The targets are adjusted based on climate zone of the building. So there are 2 climate zones, the 4C coastal climate zone and 5B inland climate zone. So that's how energy targets are adjusted. EUI is adjusted within Energy Star Portfolio Manager by doing a correlation against various weather parameters for your energy billing data.
Yeah, thanks. Next question, how will we report energy use in Energy Star Portfolio Manager for 2 or more covered buildings sharing energy meters? And still want to comply buildings separately? Yeah,
so you'll likely need to submit a grouped application when you have buildings that are metered together like that. So we have talked about that, and we really went over that a lot in previous presentations. So if you have more specific questions, we'll be happy to help you with those, but you might want to check back with some of our other documents and presentations.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Next question, does ESPM require 24 months of data? Can only 12 months be input to align with BPS requirements?
I'm not really sure. I haven't played around with it that much, and I will check. But I think for the weather normalization, it's as much data as you can put it in there as possible. We obviously ask for you to use 12 consecutive months of data to figure out your EUI. If that's all you have, I think it will work. So it's always nice to have more data, because then you can choose from, more months of data. So.
Right. And the Oregon BPS program does require multiple years worth of data to be input into Portfolio Manager for when the time comes to report in 28, 29, or 2030. Next question, are there allowances for data centers in a covered building if the data center is not separately metered?
No, no, there are not. There's one thing to do is to check out the target tool and input the information you have about your data center in there, and it will give you some guidance. And then reach out to us if you're still unsure about how to handle that data center.
Right. Yeah, it needs to be separately metered if there's to be any like considerations for separating it out.
Right.
Next question is about forklifts. What about a forklift test facility that charges forklifts daily to test on an ongoing basis? Do those chargers need to be sub-metered?
So, we've thought about this, and I think where we're coming down is that forklifts that are used inside the building will be part of the building energy use. If it's, there's a lot of like airports have a lot of equipment that gets charged and used out on the tarmac. And if that's separately metered, that could be deducted. But if it's something used inside the building, like there are people movers that are used inside airports, and if those we would not want to have removed from the energy use of the building. So it depends where they're used.
Mm-hmm. Next question, what's the earliest you can submit to prove compliance for Tier 2 and Tier 1 meeting target? So we mentioned earlier that we are working on standing up our compliance management system and reporting portal. We aim to have that online by July 1st of this year, likely a little bit earlier. And when that's live, a building owner could feasibly submit for early compliance. Next question, does specialized equipment that is high energy use, that's not part of building systems, that's not yet sub-metered, is there any other method for excluding that energy use? Like as an example, TSA x-ray machines at the airport.
Well, those are part of the function of the building, so I don't know that we would exclude those systems from the energy use of that building, even if they were separately metered.
Okay, thanks. Next question, are there allowances for covered warehouse areas that are only a part of the total square footage and are not temperature controlled like the office areas?
There's a potential ability to take an exemption if your warehouse doesn't have enough conditioned space to meet the gross floor area requirements. So it could be either unconditioned space or what we deem semi-conditioned space. We do have some information about that in our various guidance documents. I think that would be in the, not sure which guidance document that's in, but it's in one of them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thanks. Next question is around, so if O&M records don't exist, then what? If the checklist reveals gaps, are these gaps expected to be completed to achieve compliance?
That's a good question. We would like it. I know that you can't, like I said during the presentation, you can't force people to do proper O&M. What we want you to do is that if you see gaps, if you see a gap, notify someone, let them know. Maybe if you find a gap and you say this isn't being done at the building, we might want to put something on our form saying we know that there's a gap. We've notified the building owner that there's a gap and that they should be doing this particular task. I'm not really sure. We can't, like I said, we can't make people do stuff, but we do want them to know that they should be doing it, right? So.
Next question is around energy audit work. Does residential energy audit work count as experience in building energy auditing or building energy use analysis to become a qualified person or qualified energy manager? And this is coming from a standpoint of having a set of contractors with this experience, and they're trying to determine whether they might be able to meet the requirements.
Residential systems are very different from commercial systems, especially when we start getting into very large buildings. And so I guess it just depends what, I don't know. Blake, what do you think?
Yeah, I think in a couple of our definitions, we do refer specifically to commercial building auditing and energy management experience. And I think the experience would need to align with the scope of covered buildings, right? So like a multifamily residential building, experience with a covered multifamily residential, large multifamily residential building, I think would be applicable. But I think experience with single family residential building auditing or energy management is really kind of a different skill set that might not translate as well to larger covered buildings under the BPS. So I think we would look for experience with similar sort of buildings that are covered under the BPS. Next question is for Andrew. If we were awarded round 1 ECAP, can we apply for round 2? And it looks like this was already answered, but 2 awards max for each building owner. Andrew, anything else to add there?
Nope, that's it.
Great, thanks. Then there was a question about penalties. Is the $1 per square foot per year penalty capped? I don't see anything in the guidance documents or webinars in the past addressing this. If it could be 5 years worth each cycle. Believe it or not, some owners want to know the cost of doing nothing. So I think there was a link placed in the chat about incentives and penalties, but it is that $5,000 plus $1 per square foot per year, and I guess that is the cap in and of itself, where you could have a penalty up till that amount, but it could be assessed on an annual basis. So like 1 year's penalties plus another year's penalties plus another year's penalties, feasibly. But I guess I'll just reiterate that. We are really encouraging and wanting to work with building owners to collaborate to help everybody come into compliance and to reduce their energy or do what they need to do, take energy actions to reduce their costs, to implement cost-effective energy efficiency measures. So that's kind of our main goal right now, is to help every building owner get into compliance.
And
the
I just
penalties are there, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to go a little further on that and just say, if you're going to be spending money, spend it on something that's going to save you some energy over the long term. And, a penalty is just not a great use of your funds.
Yeah, thanks. Agreed. And the next question, I think this is the last one, but it says, I may have missed this, but I hear the first speaker multiple times refer to a required level 2 audit, but then on slide 53, it refers to performing an ASHRAE level 1.5. Please explain the differences and what is actually required.
Yeah, the level 2 audit is for the main part of the program. The Berry incentive program, it's an early incentive for helping you to do audits and implement measures. Maybe you can get down to your energy use target before your compliance state. So for that, it's just a level 1.5 audit, which is kind of a nebulous term, but it's not as stringent. If you were going to need to submit that audit for the rest of the program, you might have to beef it up a little bit to include the elements. But it was a way to try to make the Berry program a little bit easier access and a little quicker to get through so people could apply. So the regular program is a level 2 audit, but it's just this one incentive program where we're trying to ease up a little bit and make it less of a barrier.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Lisa, for responding to all those good questions. And thanks, everyone, for asking the good questions along the way and for sticking with us here for almost the better part of 2 hours as we walked through what it means to be a qualified professional within the Oregon BPS program and some of the roles and responsibilities for those people. So I think that brings us to the end of the questions that we had in the chat. I suppose we can just hang on for a minute if anyone else has any follow-ups, but I'll just take a minute to thank the Oregon Codes and Standards team for putting together the presentation, and thank everyone for attending today. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions come in, so I think we're probably good to end it. We'll post this recording on our website as soon as it's all processed and compiled too. So, thanks everybody. Have a nice Friday and a nice weekend.